Now, granted, it only lasted a couple of years because I was driving it like Ken Block would drive it. Since the story about the drug smuggler truck aired, it's been a very popular story. I've received tons of messages and comments from people, most constructive. A lot of people always wanted to know, like, when the guy in the story that recognized the truck, why I didn't ask him more about the truck. But of course, I'd only had it about a year at that point. It still had some viable DNA evidence in it that was the only thing linking somebody to a murder. I thought it best to just keep my mouth shut in case this guy still knew these guys. So of all those contacts, one of the coolest ones I received was from a law enforcement officer down on the border where my truck was seized. Now, I'm not going to say what branch or anything he was from, but he gave me a really neat backstory, not on my truck, but on the type of truck mine was, and I'm going to share some of that with you. And my truck is painted this black color that just sort of absorbs light. It had infrared lights on the front. It had, 3 mufflers welded end to end that were all wrapped in this kind of heat wrap and that sort of thing. And at the time when I told that story, I just assumed that was to keep Border Patrol from seeing them with their night vision and heat signature, thermal vision, all that kind of stuff. And this guy said, well, you're actually kind of wrong on that. He said, our stuff, we can see a rabbit miles away. You're not going to hide a truck from us. But the reason these smugglers do that is because the border and down in Laredo are these big ranches. The river's pretty shallow, but it's all private ranch land that bumps up to the river there. So what the smugglers will do is either buy a key, break a lock, know somebody on the inside. They sneak out onto these ranches at night. And the noise suppression, it's not really for heat, it's just to keep the noise down. And the infrared lights are so they can drive with the night vision goggles. It's really just to keep the property owners from seeing them. Because if the property owners see them out there, they'll call Border Patrol, DEA, whoever. So that stuff was really just done to keep the smugglers from getting found out by the property owners. So what they do is they, have a truck that's either been stolen or hasn't been registered in several years. The truck's a ghost. They drive it out to these ranches at night. They go out to the border. The border's a river. They park on the border. They've got a contact on the Mexican side. They use people to ferry guns, drugs, whatever it is they're smuggling across it, and then they sneak back out the way they came. So this officer said that, when they get a tip or just happened upon one of these deals going down, that they try to raid them. They turn the spotlights on. They go rushing in. And what usually happens is these trucks, and they call these trucks coyote trucks, just because they're sneaky and hard to catch, I guess. All of the trucks, he said, always have these great big old cow pusher bumpers on them. And they mean that quite literally. The bumper on my particular truck, when we tried to swap the engine out and after the motor blew, was like it was welded to the frame. It had bracing. It was welded straight to the chassis. And what they do is when somebody tries to bust them, they just punch it. And he said they drive straight across the prairie out there. He said they will drive through fences, they will ram gates, they will hit cows, whatever they got to do and get away. These trucks are way faster than the Yukons or Silverados, whatever it is that Border Patrol's got. He said unless they have a helicopter, they can't catch them. But they just punch it. And, these trucks are all ghosts, like I said. They are not registered anywhere. They are either stolen, they are taken off registry, there's no plates on them. They just go hide them under a tarp in a barn somewhere until they need them again. So these are the coyote trucks, and that's why mine had all these modifications to it. And, undoing these modifications has just been an absolute nightmare at times. The aforementioned fire that I had at the gas station when I tried to get the dash lights to work because they'd cut all the wires and just left them hanging and something shorted out. The infrared lights were easy enough to take off, but then all the switches and things, they had hacked up the dash to put all these switches in. Then the exhaust system, this truck had 3 mufflers just welded like end to end, all wrapped up with this stuff to keep the sound down. But of course that also does with a diesel is keeps the heat in. So the turbo was cooked, the exhaust manifold was cracked, ended up having to put a whole new 5-inch exhaust all the way out of the back of this thing to correct that. So where these vehicles have had these nefarious past, they're not taken care of. They're not built to be used for 10 years. They're largely disposable. So as cool as it sounds to get a truck with this hot rod motor in it, everything about that motor was not built to last. It was just everything turned up to 11, make it go as fast as possible. And if we get caught, they just ditch it. And that may be what happened to mine. I'll never know how mine got caught. I don't know the story. Nobody can legally tell me what happened to mine, but as cool of a truck as it is, it even 10 years later owning this thing, I always still find little things and not like, people, I get a lot of comments, oh, have you checked it for secret compartments? Have you checked the whole truck was a secret compartment. We were past the point of smuggling through a border stop. They just stacked it in the truck, whatever they did. So I don't find like nefarious things in the truck, but just all these little modifications that were just meant to make it hard to see or hard to hear, and I still fight them to this day. There's all these little wires and little brackets, and this has been welded, and it's a handful, but it's still a neat ownership experience. I've had so many cool experiences. The number one thing people want to see at car shows, they want to see the blood stains, which are still in the carpet. The seat is still broken. I did fix a few things, and I'll get around to fixing them eventually. But it's been a cool ride with the truck with that kind of history on it, and I still wonder, what happened in it. Every time it does something weird or unexpected, I sometimes wonder if it's the ghost of whoever met an untimely end in the front seat. But I really appreciated people reaching out. I've had at least a dozen people reach out to claim that they know my particular truck and who had it, and it belonged to an uncle, it belonged to a friend that used to be in their neighborhood. Every story is different, and everybody claims to know the truck. So maybe one of them's true, maybe not. They can't all be true, but maybe there's one out there that is. But it's been really cool meeting people around this truck and having people reach out with their speculations. Nonetheless, it's been a fantastic experience owning that truck both before and after that story aired. And since it is aired, I've had so many cool comments. But that law enforcement guy gave me a window into the background of trucks like that. Another comment I get a lot too, people ask me, like, where do I get one of these trucks? Like, how do I find a truck similar to this? And I've looked a few times, not for my own purposes, but for friends and people. Most of the auction sites that you see that sell law enforcement DEA stuff, these kind of trucks are rare. They either keep doing what they do or they end up shot up or going out in a big ball of flames. Most of the cars you find at these auction sites that were DEA seizures, it's just going to be a Kia Rio with the tires cut off with a sawzall because they were packed full of drugs. It's going to be a 88 Astro van where the seats were all packed full of marijuana. These are smuggler cars trying to get through the border. It's been pretty rare. I've seen one other truck similar to mine, big 1-ton hot rod diesel, blacked out. This one had been wrecked. So they are out there, but I just got lucky. It was a rarity, but it's rare that a functional Coyote truck makes it through the DEA auction system. But if you can find one, they're a lot of fun. Now, for my purposes of this truck, owning and buying a former smuggling vehicle was actually a disadvantage for what I wanted to do with it. I've been building this truck for the last decade to be just my version of the ultimate overlanding truck. I want to drive this truck around the world. I want to drive it through third world countries with bad diesel. I want to be able to live in it and camp in it and have the fuel range and the durability to go anywhere on the planet with this truck. And as exciting as the smuggler history that it has been, it was actually a disadvantage because the repairs I've had to do to unsmugglify this truck have been vast and complex. The only carryover from the truck was really just its cool flat black paint job. Even that monster engine that was so much fun to start with only lasted a couple of years. Now, granted, it only lasted a couple of years because I was driving it like Ken Block would drive it and just drifting it and spinning it out and drag racing it and having a good time with it. But ultimately, that's not the kind of motor you want for some sort of expedition or some ultimate road trip. It was built to within an inch of its life. Even though that is the original block in it, we've had to take the engine out. It's been bored over to fix the damage. It's been decompressed. It's set up to run on sketchy diesel fuel. Like, it's been detuned to make it more reliable. So all those performance mods pretty much became irrelevant. The lighting and everything else, I had to completely rewire the truck because, of course, they didn't thoughtfully disconnect these systems. They just cut all the wires and twisted them together. So between the amount of time and money and effort to undo all the smuggler tricks and then build it into something useful for me, it really was a disadvantage for it to be a smuggler truck. However, that being said, that truck's interesting past is what got me a connection with Ed. That's how I ended up here on VINwiki, and I've had an opportunity to tell stories. I've made some incredible friends. That truck, as a vehicle, both figuratively and literally, has changed my life because it's been, that interesting background has been the conduit for me to meet so many cool people, to become friends with folks, to get to do cool experiences like the Bandit Run and be in car shows and meet fans and meet people. And I'm so glad it has that dark history, because that enabled me to have such a cool experience, even though the actual modifications themselves were a hindrance. Anytime you can find a car with an interesting history, it will lead you to interesting people. And for that matter, I think, always seek out sketchy and interesting cars, because you never know where they're going to take you.
We all love Amazon, but most of us have had that experience where you buy something with a lot of glowing reviews that shows up and is just a piece of garbage, and it wasn't what you thought you were buying. Unfortunately, Amazon can be full of bad actors and fake reviews and things that just don't live up to what you think is going to come in a day or two after you order it. That's why New on Amazon has been developed. It was developed by Patrick Kupolari, a friend of the channel, a good storyteller who's talked about BMWs and McLaren F1s and things like that, and he's a huge e-commerce expert, and you can learn more about that on his YouTube channel. But he built a site of trusted sellers, well-reviewed products, and things that he actually knows will show up looking the way that you want them to. And so it's a great way to filter out some of the noise and some of the bad products that you might otherwise discover on Amazon. So check out New on Amazon at the link in the description below, and thank them for supporting VINwiki this month.